So I have had a day and honestly I just want to sit down and talk about some books and feel a little better. Hey everyone, it's Jananie and welcome back to my channel, This Story Ain't Over. Today's video is a pure and simple wrap up and also a bit of a TBR and also a bit of a this is what I'm currently reading, because honestly February was a pretty bad reading month for me. I had a lot of health issues and other issues going on and life decided to just throw me some curveballs, so here we are. But regardless, I did want to talk about the books that I did read, the books that I'm currently in the middle of, and also some of the books that I'm planning to read in March. I have a few experiment videos that I'm planning to do in March, so I'm going to be teasing you with a few of the books that I might be reading in some of those videos, and maybe you can guess what videos those are for. Maybe you won't, but we'll see. I am really excited to try a lot of the books on this TBR out, and we'll see how they expand my reading taste. With that said, before I get into the books that I read, the ones that I'm currently reading, and the ones that I'm hoping to read in March, I did want to talk a little bit about the sponsor of today's video, which is Book of the Month. So you guys know Book of the Month really well. I talk about them all the time. Book of the Month is a super popular, fast-growing online book service for readers. Their mission is to support new and emerging authors and help readers like you find books you're gonna love. Book of the Month vets hundreds of titles that are coming out each month, and from there you get a curated list of new and early release titles that you can pick from to get in your Book of the Month box. I say this every time, but one of my favorite things about Book of the Month is their really awesome skip policy. So if ever you don't like the selections for that particular month, you can choose to skip that month and continue your subscription later. The next amazing thing about Book of the Month is, of course, their pricing. For a new release hardcover book, you can get that for $9.99 with my code STORY and using the link down below. That is one of the best prices that you can get for a new release hardcover book these days. Trust me, I know. Every year I'm like, they can't get more expensive than this, and then they do. I literally had a friend message me recently and was like, how do you get your books? Like, they're all so expensive. And I'm like, try Book of the Month. Now you're probably wondering what the book selections are for March for Book of the Month. So I have two of them with me today. The first is Rootless by Crystal Zara Apaya. This is, I believe, a contemporary literary fiction. It's got a bit of a love story to it. It's about a married couple who is going through some issues, and it seems exactly up my alley, especially having read books like An American Marriage, but also Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. I feel like it's going to be both literary but also full of romance, so I'm interested to see how it goes. The second book I have is The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty. This is the author of the City of Brass trilogy, which is one that I've heard so many people say they love. Honestly, I don't know too much about this one, but I know it is an adult fantasy and the main character is a pirate, which love it. So I'm excited to see what the hype is about this one because it seems like it's gonna be a lot of fun. So if you're interested in either of those books, definitely go check out Book of the Month. Grab your first box for only $9.99 with my code STORY and the link down below. Okay, let's get into the books that I read in February. I have a total of 4 of them, and you actually probably saw them in the recent vlog that I did where I read TikTok romance books. So I have 3 of the physical books here, and then one of them was an ebook / audiobook that I had borrowed. So if you haven't watched my recent video where I read TikTok romance books, definitely go check that out where I go in depth on all of these books. But to give you a sense of them here in this video, the first book that I read was The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. This is one that I definitely went into with higher expectations than this book delivered. I don't think it's by any means the worst book I've read, but I don't think it's a great book either. I personally found the main character and the love interest to be not my favorite characters. I found the book to have a really not so great third act, and although it was like entertaining and funny and a pretty quick read, I overall just wanted more out of the relationship and out of the love interest, to be honest. I did appreciate the main character and how she sticks to her values by the end of the book, but overall I think it just lacked something and I wanted more out of it. If you haven't read this book, basically it starts with this couple who's getting married, and the bride has a sister and the groom has a brother, and when the bride and groom fall ill through food poisoning at their wedding, the sister and the brother end up going on their honeymoon in their stead because they don't want to like waste the vacation. They personally hate each other from a lot of other interactions before this, but they begrudgingly go on this vacation and end up falling for each other. Although it's an initial fun concept and premise, I do think overall the romance was just not my cup of tea. I think someone else might enjoy this more, but personally I didn't really feel it. And I also feel like the love interest did some things that I found questionable. However, if you are looking for like a general, easy, fun time, this might be one for you. And it's also pretty funny in the initial parts of the book. The next book that I read for that video was Dating Dr. Dil by Nisha Sharma. Really loved this book. This is basically a romance between two South Asian main characters. One is a doctor, one is a working professional. I honestly don't know what she does, but they're both really great characters, and they end up in this like hate to love-ish situation and also a fake dating relationship situation. And both of them are basically trying to get engaged in a short amount of time to fulfill these different obligations that they have and also achieve their own goals. One of the things I really liked about this book was that it was told both from the main girl's perspective, Karina, and also from the main guy's perspective, Prem. And I liked seeing both of their perspectives throughout the book because I think it helped you understand them a little bit better. And it also has this feature of like one of them believing in love and one of them not believing in love. So it's got that classic structure to it. But I think there's so many things about this book that were done so well and were so fun for me personally that I just enjoyed it so much. I feel like this book has been reduced in reviews and on TikTok to simply being like kind of smutty and also having this like one thing that a lot of people found like to be an egg. But I personally think that that was such a minor thing, and there's so many other things going on in this book that were so amazing. There is a really strong aspect of family, about dealing with grief. The main love interest, Prem, is a doctor who is trying to open a clinic for other South Asians in the community who haven't been receiving proper medical care because there's not enough like research into South Asian health. And it was just so amazing just seeing the representation in this book, and I loved it so much. I definitely don't think the book was perfect, but I think it did so many things well, and it's definitely a new romance favorite for me, and I loved it so much. Also, just an aside, I absolutely love the spicy scenes in this book. I think they were really satisfying. They were done really well, and I just enjoyed the banter and also the tension between the characters. I think it was done really well. The next book that I read for that video was Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. This is definitely my favorite book that I read from that video and probably a new favorite for 2023. I love this book so much. This is a romance book, but I do feel like it veers more into the contemporary and literary side of things. It is a book about a Black couple who are divorced. You're meeting them 2 years after they've been divorced, but they have children together, they have a business that they run together, so they're still very much deeply entrenched in each other's lives, and we're coming to their story at a point where they have sort of accepted everything that happens, but they're still going through some more healing, and there may be a possibility for them to reignite what they had before. This is a book about healing, about trauma, about grief, about love, and about like being a parent and also going through therapy and mental health. And there's so many aspects to this book that I think were so well done. And each of the characters has a really robust support system and a community of people that care for them. And I think just seeing that all on the page was just so beautiful. While reading this, I honestly just felt like I wanted these people to be my friends and I wanted the best for them. And I just felt so much for them along the way. They felt like such three-dimensional characters and they were so well written. They were flawed, they made mistakes, but they ultimately were just trying their best. So if you're a romance reader like me who typically wants a little bit more to the story beyond just the romance, I think this one is definitely one to pick up. I would advise you to look at the content warnings though, because there are aspects that can be triggering. And I don't want to understate how sad some parts of this book can be, but ultimately I think it's filled with joy and beauty and it's just so wonderful. And I loved every moment of reading this. Like I was sobbing, crying by the end, but I love the characters so much and it was so worth it. The final book that I read for that video was Funny You Should Ask by Alyssa Sussman. This was definitely the worst book that I read for that video, and it was honestly such a letdown for me because I feel like it had been hyped hard on Book Talk for me. I'd seen it on a few accounts that I honestly trusted, but now I'm like, And for those of you who don't know what this one is about, it's basically a bit of a celebrity romance. It involves this romance between this reporter and then this like big movie star named Gabe, and the two of them meet because of this like interview or article that she's writing about him, and they have this like amazing time or whatever, and then 10 years later, they're still sort of pining after each other, and they are meeting again for another interview. And that's where the story starts. So it's a bit of a second chance romance as well, but honestly I think it was so poorly done that I don't even want to sully the name of amazing second chance romances with this book. I think it's definitely more in like the celebrity romance. A lot of time is spent on like the celebrity aspect and how the main character is writing about him and all of that. I think what I didn't like about this book was the relationship between the characters. I don't think it was fully fleshed out, and I don't think it was very compelling either. I struggled to understand what they actually even liked about each other or why they were so obsessed with each other for 10 years. And even in the parts of the book where we are meeting them 10 years later, I didn't feel the emotion all that much. It just felt very stilted for me. So yeah, overall really didn't like this one. It's told in like an interesting format with like the flip between times, but also like different articles that are like thrown in there. I think it ultimately distracted from the story for me, but you might enjoy that if you're into that thing. So yeah, I think if you haven't read this one, if you've heard it hyped up a bit, then I would go into it with caution. But if you're really into celebrity romances, you might enjoy it. If you have very, very similar taste to me, you probably won't. Alrighty, next up I have 3 books that I'm currently in the middle of, and then a couple that I'm reading like as this video is going up for a video that I'm doing for my channel members. If you're not a channel member, go check it out down below. There's like a whole intro video where I talk about the different perks, but it's a cute little community where you can support me and also hang out with me and get extra exclusive perks, so definitely go check it out. So for my channel members vlog, I'm reading Blood Marked by Tracy Deonn currently. I'm about a third to a halfway through this. It's going great. I definitely have thoughts about this one, and I think it's not gripping me the same way as Legendborn, but I'm excited to see like how the rest of the book goes. I do feel like when I read Legendborn, it was quite a few years ago. I was really, really into YA at the time, and I found it to just be so amazing. I think now approaching this book, I haven't really been enjoying a lot of YA recently, and so although I think this book is doing things amazing, I just feel like I'm not the target for it anymore, so I'm just not enjoying it as much. But I don't think that that's like a knock on this book. Like, it's still amazing and everyone should read it. But for those of you who don't know this book, it is the sequel to Legendborn by Tracy Deonn, which is a fantastic sort of contemporary fantasy with elements of the Arthurian legend, secret society, a amazing black main character, and just like black girl magic overall. It's beautiful, amazing, one of the best things you will read, and also a bit of like a dark academia, you could even say, the way it's constructed, so definitely check it out. The second book I'll be reading for my channel members vlog is The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is Tiffany D. Jackson's newest horror novel. I absolutely love anything this woman writes, and I will read every single one because she just is amazing and I love everything she writes. I have never not enjoyed one of her books, and I cannot wait to be blown away by this one. And I recently just have been enjoying a lot of horror, so I think this one will be fun. It is a bit of a Carrie retelling, I've been told, and it's a bit of a slasher and like involves prom. And that's about all I know. The third and final book I'll be reading for my channel members vlog is The Daughter of Dr. Moreau by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. This is one that I've been putting off for so long. I definitely think that this one has been a bit of a struggle to get into compared to Sylvia Moreno Garcia's other books, but I'm so curious to see how it goes. I have been seeing more and more mixed reviews about this one online and from like people I know who love Sylvia Moreno Garcia, so I'm a little scared. All I know about this one is that it's a bit of a sci-fi fantasy set in 19th century Mexico and is a bit of a retelling of the island of Dr. Moreau. Now, a couple other books that I'm currently in the middle of. I am currently reading Chain of Thorns by Cassandra Clare. I started reading this one and I think I'm about, yeah, over 200 pages into this one, but it's like 800 pages, so have I really made a dent in it? Who knows? I am enjoying this so far. I love, love, love coming back to the Shadowhunter world. I love every time I pick up a Cassandra Clare book. I love like entering into this world and coming back to these characters that feel like home and like family, but I do think my expectations for them are consistently lower and lower and lower, just because I feel like, one, I'm growing out of YA, and two, because I feel like there are a lot of aspects of these books that can get repetitive just because like we are seeing similar things go on and we're still in the same world, even if it's in like different time periods. But regardless, I still really care about these characters and where they all end up and who they end up with. So yeah, I'm invested, but I'm like taking this one a little bit slower. I kind of like binge read the first couple hundred pages and then I had to put it down for other books, but I do want to get back to this at some point. I have heard though that there have been some mixed opinions about this book, this final installment. I have heard a lot of people say that they've been like underwhelmed by it. So far, I think nothing really significant or dramatic has happened yet. I feel like miscommunication is like a very strong theme in this series, and it definitely irks me, but like I'm just trying to let it go. So a lot of things are just not phasing me right now, but I'm interested to see what I think of this by the end. The next book that I'm still currently in the middle of is one that I mentioned in, I think, my book haul recently, and that book is The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi. I recently got my pre-order in the mail, so that's why I mentioned it in my book haul. I've actually been reading this book since January of this year, and I'm still not done. And I talk a lot about the reasons for this in my book haul, so definitely go check that out from a couple weeks ago. But so far, I feel like I am just not the reader who would typically enjoy this book. It's definitely more like all vibes, no plot, and it's very different from how it was initially marketed as. It was initially marketed as like this story about a marriage and the trappings and sinister things that can go on, but really it's a book that has this fairy tale vibe to it and tells this story about this female friendship in the book that I think is really great, but I just went into this book with like very different expectations, so I was definitely a bit disappointed. And I think where I am right now in the book, I'm like 2/3 of the way through, so I still have like the ending of the book to read, but so far like I'm just not getting what I wanted, so that's kind of why I've been dragging my feet on finishing this one. I had an arc of the book, which is why I was reading it in January, but it came out in February. So yeah, it's on my list to like finish, but I don't think the ending's gonna drastically change how I feel about this book, but we'll see. Some of you said it might, so I don't know. However, I do want to say that I don't think this is a bad book. I just don't think I am the type of reader who would enjoy it. I think plenty of people out there love the whole like no plot, all vibes, and I'm just not one of those people, but I do think it is quite beautifully written, and I'm intrigued by the characters and like the whole fairy tale feeling of the book and all these slightly sinister things that are going on, but yeah, I just wanted more out of it. Alrighty, with that said, those are all the books that I'm currently reading, and now I have 4 books that I have for my March TBR. These 4 books are for a couple different experiment videos that I'm working on for March, but they are not all the books that I'm going to be reading for those videos. I have a few others for those videos, but I just don't have physical copies of them, so I just decided not to include them in this video, and I also want to keep some things a bit of a secret for you guys. With that said, the first book that I have is Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. I have read a Octavia E. Butler book before, and it was actually a sci-fi book that I read for a sci-fi class in university, and it was so freaking fantastic. It was one of the most original sci-fi books I had ever read, and I just found it to be so interesting, and also one that tackled so many different social issues. And Kindred is of course one of her most famous books, and one that I've been dying to read for ages. Basically, this book follows our main character Dana, who is a 20th century Black woman who is celebrating her 26th birthday, and she's celebrating it with her husband in California when she is sort of snatched from her current timeline and transported back in time to the antebellum South. She has been summoned to save the life of Rufus, who is the white son of a plantation owner, and she doesn't know why it's happening, and after that happens, she is brought back multiple times for longer periods of time each time, and she is sort of forced to witness in person the brutal legacy of slavery and white supremacy. I think this is going to be such a fantastic read. I've heard so many amazing things about it. I think it's going to get me in all the places, and it's just going to leave me thinking about it for ages to come, so can't wait. Alrighty, next up I have a book that I've been meaning to read for over a year now, and that is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. I have been wanting to read this book ever since I read The City We Became by this author, and actually even before that I wanted to read this book because I heard so many people rave about it. This series is the winner of multiple awards, like fantasy awards and other awards, and I know so many people who love this series, but honestly I felt pretty daunted to get into the series and start it because it's a longer series and it felt like it was going to be really dense. But after reading The City We Became by this author and being so impressed with how amazing that book was and how diverse it was and how well written it was, I have been so excited to pick this one up. I know this one is more of a high fantasy and quite different from The City We Became, but I'm still really excited to see how it goes. Alrighty, the next book on my TBR is Dial A for Aunties by Jessie Q. Sutanto. This is one that I've been also meaning to read for a while. I think I've put it on multiple TBRs before. This is a romance slash contemporary fiction, I believe. I think it's more on the contemporary fiction side based off of what I've heard, but basically it follows our main character who goes on a date and accidentally kills her date, I think, or he dies somehow, and so she has to hide the body, and she enlists the help of her aunties who are helping her out, but then I think they get the body like put in with their catering stuff for their catering business, and so they have to like crash a wedding, I think, and it just seems like a recipe for disaster. And I've heard so many amazing things about this book, and it honestly just seems so fun and like a hilarious situation, so I feel like it'll be the perfect pick-me-up for me. And recently my sister was also reading this book and she said it was going fantastic, so I'm excited to see how it goes for me. This also happens to have one of my favorite things in books, which is aunties in books. I love aunties in books. I don't know why, they just make me so happy, especially when they're really supportive aunties. Dating Dr. Dill also had aunties in the book and I loved it a lot, so I'm excited for the aunties in this one. Alrighty, and then the final book that I have for this little March TBR is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. I've talked about this book a couple times before in hauls, and also I think in a couple TBRs. I wanted to read it earlier last year. Basically all I know about this book is that it involves this relationship and like psychological dynamic between this precocious teenager and her teacher. And the story is actually told not only when she's a teenager, but also later on, many years later, when she has realized sort of the impact of what all this was in her teenage years, and she is sort of coming to terms with what happened. I believe it has a bit of a like Me Too aspect to it, and I think overall it's going to be a pretty powerful read. I think initially when I had first heard about this book, I had reservations because I didn't realize it was from the perspective of the woman and how she's like looking back on the situation and the harms of it. And I'm honestly just interested to see what the hype is about as well, because I've heard a lot of people say that this one is amazing. And with that said, those are all the books that I have to talk about for this video. The books that I read in February, the books that I'm currently reading, and my March TBR. I know there weren't many books that I had finished reading in February for me to talk about, but I hope that this will be sort of encouraging for those of you out there who watch my like January wrap up and you're like, oh my god, she read like 15 books. How come I'm not reading that much? And then I hope that you can look at this video and be like, oh my god, she only read like 4 books. I guess I'm not doing that bad. Because I think there's this perception that we need to be reading a lot of books each month to be perceived as a reader and to be part of the community, when in fact, no matter how much you are reading, you are still a reader, and this is still something you enjoy and that you consider part of your life, and that still makes you part of the community. And you can still be part of the community and discuss all of its merits and cons, regardless of how much you are reading. So yeah, I hope you will just find this comforting in the sense that, like, you know, it's okay no matter how much you're reading, you're still valid. As always, I appreciate you guys a lot, and thank you so much for watching. Definitely let me know what you thought of any of the books that I talked about in this video, whether it was the ones that I finished reading or the ones that I'm currently in the middle of. And let me know if you've read any of the TBR books that I talked about as well and what you thought of them, because I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, if you want to get regular updates on my reading and what I'm up to, definitely go check out my Instagram and TikTok. If you want to watch more videos like this, then definitely go check out the playlist of videos I have here of all my wrap-ups. I'll see you guys in my next video, and please remember that this story ain't over. Bye!